If you've ever worked with numbers, you know the feeling. You spot the mistake before you even have time to think. You just know something's off. That's been my life for 12 years. At work, it's a superpower. At home, as it turned out, it was a complete disaster. My name is Kate, and I'm going to tell you how a simple credit card rejection blew my life apart. And then, and this part matters, how I put the pieces back together. Differently. Better, but let me start with that morning. A Tuesday in March, when my banking app sent me a notification I initially assumed was a system error. My credit score was 511. I looked at the screen, shook my phone, looked again, 511. Just so you understand, to get a score like that, you have to work at it. Hard, for a long time. I hadn't been doing that. I was the kind of person who paid her credit card a day before the due date, just to be safe. So my first thought was error, technical glitch. It happens. My second thought arrived 3 seconds later, and it wasn't quite as calm. That evening, I showed Marcus the notification. Just slid the phone across the table while he was eating. Didn't say a word, just watched. You know, I've worked with people for years. I can tell when someone's lying in a report by the way the numbers are arranged, where the gaps are, what's been bolded, and what's buried in the footnotes. People lie the same way, most people just don't know how to read it. Marcus looked at the screen, looked up, said, "That's probably some kind of mistake." Voice calm, face surprised, shoulders relaxed, almost, but not quite. He didn't ask how much. Anyone who sees someone else's bad credit score asks that first. How much? It's a reflex. It's a normal reaction. He didn't ask. I filed that away, put it on a separate shelf in my head, and went to wash the dishes. That night, while Marcus slept, I opened the laptop. The laptop loaded quickly. Marcus was asleep in the next room. I could hear him breathing. Steady and even, a man with a clear conscience. Or a man who'd learned long ago to sleep without one. I opened the browser and typed his name, Marcus Hale, and his company, Hale Auto Group. He always said Googling yourself was narcissism. I understood why now. The first results were nothing. The company website, a couple of reviews on some automotive forum, a LinkedIn page he hadn't updated in 3 years. I kept scrolling. No particular goal, just looking. You know how it goes, you search for one thing and find something else entirely. I was looking for anything. Customer complaints, lawsuits, any kind of thread to pull. I found something else. It was a small notice on a local newspaper website, from a town 3 hours away. The life and events section, a photograph, a young couple outside a city hall. She was in a white dress. He was in a gray jacket. Him. Not someone who looked like him, not someone with the same name. Him, Marcus Hale. 10 years younger, maybe, but him. Below the photo, a date, 4 years before our wedding. I closed the laptop. Then opened it again, read it once more. The bride's name, Christine, her married name, Hale, Christine Hale. I sat at the kitchen table and thought about something very simple, very specific. Marcus and I had a marriage certificate, a proper one, with a seal. I'd seen it. Held it in my hands. But if he married Christine, and if he never divorced Christine, then what exactly had I been holding? From the bedroom came a sound, Marcus turning onto his other side. I didn't move. Just sat there looking at the dark laptop screen. At my own reflection in it. You know what's strange? I didn't cry. Not once. Instead, something inside me very quietly, very neatly, clicked into place. Like the last number in a column that finally adds up. The total just wasn't what I'd expected. I came back to the bedroom at 2:30, lay down next to Marcus. Stared at the ceiling. His hand was beside mine, almost touching. I didn't move away, just lay there and thought. There's a moment at work when you can see something's wrong in a report, but you don't yet know what. You just feel it, something's off. And the biggest mistake in that moment is to act immediately. To panic, to call your manager. Because if you don't understand the full picture, you might scare off exactly what you're looking for. First, gather everything. Then, think. I slept 4 hours, got up before Marcus, made coffee. When he came into the kitchen, I smiled and asked if he wanted eggs. He did. I made eggs. We had breakfast. He kissed me on the cheek on his way out and said he'd be back by 7. I said fine. The door closed, and I got to work. First, our shared email account. The one we'd opened when we moved into the apartment. For utility bills, household things. Marcus barely used it, or so I thought. I found letters there from 2 banks. Not our bank, others. In his name, statements for accounts I didn't know existed. I copied the account numbers into a notebook. Paper, old, the one that lived in the kitchen drawer where I kept recipes and curtain measurements. Now it held other things. Second, his company, Hale Auto Group. I knew it existed. Knew he dealt in used cars, sometimes complained about difficult clients. I'd never really looked into it. His business was his business. Turned out, not quite. I found the company registration documents on the state website. Public information, anyone can look. There were 2 founders, Marcus Hale and Catherine Hale, me. I was a co-founder of a company I didn't know I was part of. Which meant if the company had debts, problems, lawsuits, those were my problems too, automatically, on paper. I wrote that down in the notebook, even handwriting. My hand didn't shake. I think I simply switched off the part of me that knows how to be afraid, and switched on the part that knows how to count. By evening, I had a file, not a physical one, it was in my head. Clear, structured, 4 columns. What I know for certain, what I suspect, what needs to be verified, what to do next. The column marked what I know for certain was already filling up. When Marcus came home at 7, I reheated dinner, asked how his day went. He told me something about a client and a new car. I listened and nodded. The next morning, I drove to the place I should have gone to a long time ago, where the real documents are kept. Not the ones people show each other. The ones they sign in front of the government. The Consumer Protection Agency smelled like old paper and air conditioning. That specific institutional smell, neutral, official. I always thought I didn't like places like that. Turned out they're fine. When you need the truth, official places become your best friends. I walked up to the counter and asked about complaints filed against a specific company. The man asked for the name. I gave it. He started typing. Slowly, 2 fingers. I watched his face. I'm good at reading faces. There, he found something. Stopped typing. Looked at me a fraction more carefully than a moment before. What is your relationship to this company? I'm a co-founder, I said. I just found out. He was quiet for a second, then turned the monitor so I could see. There were a lot of complaints, not 2 or 3. Over the past year and a half, more than 20. Customers said the same things. The car was in worse condition than advertised. Rolled back odometers. Damage that had been hidden before the sale. One person bought a car that wouldn't start a week later. Wrote that the dealer had promised to fix it and disappeared. The agent was saying something about an open investigation, timelines, notifications that should have been sent to co-founders. I was nodding and only half listening, because the other half of my brain was calculating. Over 20 complaints, a year and a half, that meant Marcus knew. He couldn't not have known. And all that time, he'd been sitting across from me at dinner telling me about difficult clients. About how hard it was in this business. About how people were never satisfied. I asked the agent to print everything he could give me. He printed it, slid a stack of papers across the counter. You should probably speak to an attorney, he said quietly. As a co-founder, you could be held liable, even if you didn't know. I know, I said. Thank you. I walked out to the parking lot. got in the car, put the papers on the passenger seat, pulled out the notebook, the one with the curtains and recipes, and added a few more lines to the "What I Know for Certain" column. The courthouse was 10 minutes away. The courthouse smelled like old paper and air conditioning. There's a specific government smell, neutral, flat. I used to think I didn't like places like that. Turns out they're fine. When you need the truth, official buildings become your closest friends. Vital records are public information. Not everyone knows that, but they are. I walked up to the counter and asked for records under the name Marcus Hale. The woman behind the desk, maybe 50, glasses on a chain, looked at me without asking unnecessary questions. She was used to this. I wasn't the first. She typed for a long time, then again. Then leaned closer to the screen, the way you do when you want to make sure you've read it right. "No divorce on file," she said finally. "There is a marriage registration. 4 years before yours if you're the Catherine Hale in question." "That's me," I said. She nodded, printed a page, handed it over. I took it, looked, Christine's name right there, the date of the wedding, everything as I'd expected. Then I noticed a note at the bottom of the page. Small, in such fine print I had to squint. Petition for dissolution of marriage filed by Christine Hale. Date filed almost 3 years ago, and next to it status. Pending. She had filed for divorce 3 years ago, but the divorce had never been finalized. I looked up at the woman behind the counter. "What does pending mean after 3 years? Is that normal?" She paused. "It happens when one party doesn't appear at hearings or deliberately delays the process. The court can't close the case without both parties present." I slowly folded the paper and put it in my bag. So Christine had wanted a divorce 3 years ago, and Marcus hadn't shown up, deliberately stalled. Why? Maybe money, division of assets, maybe something else. But the fact was simple and very clear. He knew he wasn't divorced. He knew when he proposed to me. Knew when we stood before the judge and said yes. Knew all 6 years. This wasn't a mistake. There was no forgot to file the paperwork. This was a choice. I walked outside. The sun hit me directly in the eyes, unpleasant, sharp. I took out my phone and found a number I'd saved that morning. An attorney. A friend had recommended her a year ago, just in case. I'd laughed at the time. Why would I need a family lawyer? I wasn't laughing now. As I dialed, I was thinking about something very specific. Legally, I had never been married to Marcus, which meant no joint property, no division of assets, but it also meant something else. His debts were not my debts. His company with 20+ complaints and an open investigation was technically my problem. But if our marriage was invalid, I could challenge my role in that company. Because I had never signed any documents. My name had appeared there without my knowledge. Someone picked up on the second ring. "I need a consultation," I said. "Today, if possible, it's urgent." I got home by 2, put the kettle on, sat at the table, opened the laptop. Found Christine Hale's page. She hadn't changed her name after filing for divorce. Interesting. Either she didn't want to go back to her maiden name, or she was waiting for it to be official. Her page was public. Photos, ordinary life. Morning coffee, a Labrador, occasional sunsets. She worked as a designer, judging by the portfolio in her bio. Still lived in the same town where she and Marcus had got married. She'd never left. I looked at her photos and thought she didn't look like someone who had destroyed another person's life. She looked like someone whose life had been destroyed. Her last post was 3 days ago. A photo of the dog in autumn leaves. Caption, "The only man I trust," with a little smile emoji. I closed her page, opened the Messenger app, found her name. I sat there for a few minutes with an empty text field. You know, I've seen people write complicated messages, explanations, justifications, long preambles to prepare someone for what they're about to hear. I'm not good at that. I'm good at short and to the point. I wrote, "My name is Kate. I think we both know the same person. If I'm right, I need to talk to you. If I have the wrong person, just don't reply." Sent it. Closed the laptop. Stood up, poured tea. Drank half of it standing by the window. Watched the street, an ordinary day, cars, someone walking a dog. The world outside looked completely normal, as if nothing was happening inside my apartment. My phone vibrated 8 minutes later. I stared at the screen for a few seconds before opening it. I knew this day would come, I just didn't know when or who would write. "Can you talk now?" I called her immediately. She picked up on the first ring. Her voice was calm. Slightly tired, not surprised, not at all. "How long?" I asked without preamble. "We were together for 7 years," she said, "married for 3, then he just disappeared. One day. Phone blocked, came and took his things while I was out. I filed for divorce 6 months later, still waiting on the court decision. He doesn't show up to hearings. Never, not once. My attorney says it's deliberate without an official divorce. He's protected from certain financial claims on my side." I was quiet for a second, then asked what I'd wanted to ask from the start. "Did you know he got married again?" A short pause. "I suspected, but I didn't know for certain, until now." We talked for another 40 minutes. Christine spoke evenly, without hysteria, like someone who'd thought everything through long ago and was simply waiting for the moment to say it out loud. About money that had disappeared. About a business he'd opened in her name without her knowledge. She'd had the same thing, it turned out. About how she'd once found documents in his things under a name that wasn't his. I wrote it all down in the notebook, the one with the curtains and recipes. When we were wrapping up, Christine said quietly, "I'm glad you called, really. I was starting to think I was losing my mind." "You're not," I said. "Everything you have is solid, I checked." She laughed. Briefly, a little bitterly. "You're an accountant?" "Yes, how did you know?" "Because you're the first person in 3 years who said I checked instead of I believe you." I closed the notebook. Outside it was getting dark. The attorney in an hour. The "what I know for certain" column was almost full. Marcus left at 7:30. Earlier than usual, he always left at 8. It was like clockwork. I was still in bed when I heard the door. Got up. Went to the kitchen. The coffee machine was still warm. He'd made coffee, which meant he'd been up a while. I poured myself a cup and opened the laptop. Our shared one. The one that lives on the kitchen table and gets used for everything: recipes, bills, movies in the evening. The browser opened to his email. He'd forgotten to log out. I stared at the screen for maybe 3 seconds, no longer. Then took my phone and photographed the screen just in case before reading anything. An accountant's habit. Document first, then examine. There were a lot of emails. I didn't read everything, just what was at the top. The most recent one sent the previous evening, while I was at the attorney's office. The recipient, a name I didn't know. A company I didn't know. Subject line, Ray, transfer timeline. The message was short. Marcus wrote that the money needed to move by end of week, that the situation was getting complicated and it was better not to wait, that the account, the one they knew, and one sentence at the end that I read twice: "My wife is asking questions, need to move fast." My wife is asking questions. I closed the laptop. Stood up, walked across the kitchen, there back. Poured my coffee down the sink even though I'd barely touched it. So he'd sensed something. Didn't know what exactly, but sensed it. Maybe my behavior had shifted slightly more than I'd realized. Maybe something else. Didn't matter. What mattered was this: he was moving money. Which meant the account I'd found in the shared inbox might have nothing left in it by end of week. Which meant I didn't have a few days. I had maybe 3. Maximum. You know what's strange? I wasn't scared, not at all. Instead, I felt something like cold clarity, the kind that comes when a task suddenly becomes very specific, not figure out the situation, but concrete steps, deadlines, results. I opened my phone and texted the attorney. Short, there's new information, need to talk today. He replied in 10 minutes, I can do 1 o'clock. Then I texted Christine. Also short, he's moving money. If you have any account numbers you know about, I need them today. Her reply came fast. 1 account number. And 1 line, I've been waiting 3 years for this moment. Tell me what you need. I looked at the number, wrote it in the notebook, then opened a fresh page. Clean, wrote 1 word at the top, plan, and started writing. Fast, no crossings out, point by point. An hour later, I had a 4-page plan. It was more than Marcus deserved, but less than he was going to get. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I couldn't, I just didn't want to waste the time. Marcus lay beside me and slept. I lay there and thought. Went through the plan point by point, slowly, the way you reread a report before submitting it. Looking for weak spots, finding them, fixing them in my head. By 5 in the morning, the plan was final. At 7:30, Marcus got up, had coffee, kissed me on the cheek, said he'd be back by 6. I said fine, smiled, closed the door behind him, and started, first call the attorney. He picked up immediately, as if he'd been expecting me. I covered everything in 8 minutes, Marcus's email, the account number from Christine, the timeline. He listened without interrupting. Then said, I'll be at the courthouse by 10. I'll file for an asset freeze on the company. Send me the screenshot and the account number. I sent them while we were still talking. Second call, the bank. Not the one with our joint account. The one with my personal account, opened 8 years ago before Marcus, the one he knew about but never paid much attention to. I asked to transfer my share from the joint account. The operator asked the full amount. I said yes. Then I called the Consumer Protection Agency. Asked for the agent I'd met, the one with the name tag. He was in. I told him I was ready to provide additional materials on Hale Auto Group, and that as a co-founder, one who'd been listed without her knowledge or consent, I intended to formally challenge my role in the company. He was quiet for a moment, then said, Come in, we have a form for that. I arrived at 11. Filled out the form, left copies of the documents. At 1 o'clock, I met the attorney at his office. He sat behind his desk looking like a man who'd had a very full morning. Asset freeze approved, he said. The company can't process transactions until the court rules. The account you provided also frozen. Your husband, he paused slightly on the word husband, will find out today. He probably already has. I looked at my watch. 1:30. What's next? Next, fraud charges. Using your name in registration documents without your consent is a criminal matter. Not civil, criminal, I nodded. And one more thing, he said, about your marriage. Legally, as you understand, it doesn't exist. That means you have no liability for his debts, but it also means you have no standard spousal rights to asset division. However, there's another route, marriage fraud, a separate claim, and it gives you far more than a standard divorce. I sat and listened. Outside his office window it was raining, light, autumnal. People on the street were opening umbrellas. How long will it take? I asked. Depends on how much he fights it. He'll fight it, I said, but that's his problem, not mine. The attorney looked at me with something close to respect. You came very prepared. I'm an accountant, I said. I always come prepared. Usually it's for quarterly reports. He smiled. I didn't. I still needed to get home before 6. I'd packed the bag that morning, while Marcus was drinking coffee in the other room. Not much, a few things, documents, my laptop. Everything important. I didn't take any photos. Then I reconsidered and took one. The two of us on the coast 3 years ago, not because I missed it. I just wanted to look at it someday and figure out at exactly which moment in that photo he was already lying. Try to read it in his eyes. Professional curiosity, you could say. At 5:30, I took out a sheet of paper. Clean, white. Sat at the kitchen table, the same one where we'd had breakfast and dinner and talked about nothing for 6 years. Picked up a pen and wrote a list. You know, I'd been thinking about this all day, what to write. A long letter, explanations, questions. No, none of that. I didn't have questions. I already had all the answers. So just a list, neat, numbered. Point 1, I know about Christine Hale and the fact that our marriage is legally invalid. Point 2, I know about Hale Auto Group, the 20-plus complaints, and the open investigation, and that my name appeared in those documents without my knowledge. Point 3, the company's assets are frozen. The account is frozen. That can't be undone. Point 4, a marriage fraud claim has been filed. That's a criminal matter. Point 5, Christine Hale is aware of everything. We've spoken. And the final point, my attorney's phone number. With a note, I'd recommend calling today. It'll cost more tomorrow. I read through the list. Steady handwriting, no corrections. Placed it in the center of the table, where the fruit bowl usually sat. Moved the bowl to the windowsill. Let the list be easy to see. Then picked up my bag. Left my keys on the table beside the list, mine, not his. I didn't need them anymore. Walked out. Pulled the door closed. Outside it was cold, that damp October when it's no longer quite autumn but not yet winter. I walked to the car, put the bag on the back seat. Sat down. Started the engine. And only then, for the first time in 4 days, let myself just sit. Do nothing, not plan, not calculate, just sit and look through the windshield. You know what I felt? Not relief, not pain, not anger. At first, nothing at all. As if something inside me had switched off a noise I'd stopped hearing because I'd lived with it so long. And then, very slowly, something that felt like curiosity. Strange and quiet. I wondered what would come next. Not for him, his story was clear enough. For me, what would come next for me? I didn't know the answer. For the first time in a very long time, I didn't know something, and that was okay. I pulled away at 6 on the dot. 10 minutes into the drive, city traffic. My phone vibrated. Unknown number. I didn't pick up. A minute later again. I didn't pick up again. Then I sent Christine one message. I've left, everything's done. As agreed with the attorney, keep me posted on your end. She replied fast. No words, just one emoji. A raised fist. I smiled. First time in 4 days, really smiled. 8 months have passed since then. Sometimes it feels like 8 years. Sometimes like 8 days. Depends on the mood. Here's what happened. Short version, just the facts. Marcus called 7 times that night. On the 8th, I switched off my phone. The next morning, he sent a long message, explanations, justifications, something about how I'd misunderstood, and he'd needed time to sort things out with Christine. I forwarded it to my attorney. No comment. His attorney called 3 days later. Offered to settle quietly out of court. Mine explained why that wasn't in Marcus's interest, quiet or loud. The criminal charge didn't go away. Negotiations took 2 months. Then Marcus stopped fighting. He'd probably done the math and realized there was nothing left to count. Hale Auto Group was shut down. The investigation ended with a fine and a ban on operating the same type of business in the state. My name was removed from the documents. The court ruled that the signature had been forged. It took time and it took nerve, but they removed it. The marriage fraud case resulted in a settlement. Not huge, but enough to rent a decent apartment and not think about money for the first year. Christine finally got her divorce, official, with a seal. She texted me when the court ruling came through, one word, finally. I wrote back the same. We stay in touch occasionally, not friends exactly, but something like it. People who understand each other without needing to explain. What became of Marcus? I only know what my attorney told me. He moved to another state. Work somewhere. The details don't interest me. You know what changed in me over these 8 months? Less than I expected, and more than I thought. I still work with numbers. Still spot mistakes before I have time to think. The difference is, I know now that it's not a superpower and it's not a curse. It's just me, and that's enough. In the mornings, I make coffee for one. Sit by the window. Don't rush anywhere for the first 20 minutes. The first month that felt strange. Then it became normal. Then it became the best part of the day. Sometimes I think I should have checked sooner, not him myself. What I needed, what mattered, what I was actually building over those 6 years. But I'm not sure the earlier version of me was ready for the answers. Sometimes you need life to hand you the printout itself, with a seal, and put it on the table in front of you. Then you can't ignore it. I threw out the notebook with the curtains and recipes. Bought a new one, clean. The first entry, a list of what I want. Not what needs to get done, not what needs to be checked, just what I want. The list turned out shorter than I expected. As it happens, that was good news.